Joining us right now is Dr. Gregory Price. How does the economy work? During the 2024 presidential campaign, a lot was made of the cost of goods. You kept hearing about this. Dr. Price is a professor of economics at the University of New Orleans, former interim dean, School of Business at Langston University, Charles E. Merrill Professor and Chair, Department of Economics at Morehouse College, Director of the Mississippi Urban Research Center, also Professor of Economics at Jackson State University, and an Economics Program Director at the National Science Foundation, also former President of the National Economic Association. Dr. Price, thank you for joining me.
My pleasure, Eddie. Yeah, my pleasure, and good afternoon.
So tell us about the Morehouse mystique. There's a mystique about this institution that when Morehouse men, and I tell you, one of my favorite sayings in all of higher education is that you can tell a Morehouse man, but you can't tell him much.
Yes.
That is one of my, and confidently he acknowledges it.
Yeah, that is a saying, but, I mean, part of the mystique is that, as an institution for all males, I mean, we've always cultivated, a culture of excellence and excellence. So that's fundamentally what it is. The culture of excellence that we manufactured and try to cultivate and sustain. So it's we're committed to that there historically. Yeah.
That is very cool, man. Yeah. I mean it. I really would like to see a conversation of a bunch of Morehouse men in one room and just, maybe not. I don't think liquor would even be needed, but I just have to see this conversation.
Well, if you get around to that, sign me up.
All right, good.
If you get around to
that, I'll let you know. I'm going to organize it. I'm charging. I'm charging admission to this thing. I'm keeping all the profit. Dr. Price, so it's really hard, I think, for a lot of people to figure out where to start when you talk about the economy. And we're going to do this as kind of an economics 101, a really quick and dirty version of it so that people understand. Because I do think that with the presidential campaign, you kept hearing people, rightfully so, talk about the price of goods going up, especially goods that people need and use all the time. So let's start here. How does that happen? What sets the prices of goods and services in our economy?
Okay, sure. So to get back on our economic principles 101, I mean, we presume that firms are profit maximizers, right? They produce outputs and goods services to a level that they want the highest level of profits. Now, if you recall, that price that they charge in the marketplace is a function of its marginal cost of production, plus the amount of markup it can charge based upon the number of substitutes for a given good or service, right? So the marginal cost of production matters. What does it cost to bring a good or service to the market? Right. So now they can mark up above marginal cost for a particular good or service if it has very few substitutes. For example, if you want pure butter and you don't like margarine, you're willing to tolerate a little bit more price increase, for example.
Okay.
Right? So now, what has happened from a standpoint of the election politics and electioneering around this, during the COVID-19 pandemic, there were disruptions in the supply chain.
Right.
I mean, give you an example. We ordered some flooring that were put on hold for 3 years because it had to come from Germany, right? So the supply chains are choked up, which basically allowed for firms to mark up more and a decrease in supply. So the pandemic was a causal factor in the increase in prices for all sorts of things, chicken, beef, et cetera, because our world is so interdependent now. Most of the stuff we purchase, goods, physical goods, depend upon foreign inputs, right? So when those things are choked up at the seaports because of COVID, the prices went up.
So let me play something out. Let's say that I have a soda I'm producing.
Yeah.
It costs me, I don't know, $12 a bottle to produce this soda. But I need to make a profit. So I'm going to sell it for $15 a bottle, something crazy.
Yeah, mark up above.
I'm going to mark it up.
Yeah.
And so what I'm doing is I'm trying to make my profit, whatever that and the margin would be that extra $3 or whatever dollars, right?
Yeah.
During COVID, I'm having a bunch of soda shipped over, and it gets stuck in the ports. Because this is what we were dealing with, right? We were dealing with...
In part, not wholly, in part,
Okay,
in part. But of course, again, the extent to which you can mark up depends upon how many substitutes are available. If you like Coke, are you willing to substitute toward, the Rouse's brand of Cola, for example, right? And that depends on taste, right? So if there are choke ups in the supply chain and a reduction in the amount of substitutes, that allows firms to mark up a little bit more, right? So you got these supply shifts and demand shifts, right? Right. Reduction of substitutes, allowing firms to mark up more. Now, that's for goods and services, but think about the other things. I mean, housing costs went up as well too, right? Housing costs went up too because of individuals. One plausible scenario is that during COVID, a lot of people purchased houses outside to work as they can work from home, pushing up that put upward pressure on rental prices and home prices. So the COVID-19 was a pretty strong factor in the cumulative inflation we have seen, since 2019, a 4-year period. I mean, cumulative prices have gone up for many goods and services on the order of 20%. When you look at the year-to-year increases for eggs, for butter, for chicken, for beef, rents, for example. Yeah.
And it's not
so we call that a shock. A shock to the economy that COVID, constituted a shock that put upward pressure on prices. Yeah.
And it's not like the price is just going to go down just because we want it to. I mean, these are people who are having to because these disruptions, they cost the manufacturers, they cost the producers money.
Yeah.
So they had to pass that on. They pass it off.
The history of price levels itself is kind of bizarre because if you look at the trend in the price level. Up until about 1914, from 1776, the price level showed no upward, downward trend. It's a post-1914 phenomenon that the overall price level trended upward. And there are a lot of stories about why all of a sudden after 1914, the price level showed a trend upward. Prior to that, it had no trend, upward, downward. So not that we were around then, but if you were born in 1776 and lived to 1914, the price of eggs would have neither gone up or gone down, right? So that's another story that macro historians have been trying to tell for the past 50 years, about what is it about the price level that's shown in modern times, post-1914, it's only going up, right? It's only going up, yeah.
We're talking to Dr. Gregory Price. He is a professor of economics at the University of New Orleans, and we're talking about the economy, trying to understand what happens, why we pay what we pay. So one of the things that we hear every presidential election, it becomes a topic of discussion. It was a big topic of discussion this time. Is it true that there is a lag after a presidential term that the current president adopts the most recent president's economy in some way?
Yeah, there's a whole literature on political business cycles, whether or not presidents actually have causal effects on the economy. And, it's mixed. But the point is, presidents will own the, whether they have any control over it or not. I mean, are there, for example, there are things presidents could do to make it worse or better. I mean, tariffs, for example, could very well trigger a trade war. Yeah, there are some things presidents could do, but overall, they pretty much, one view is that they're pretty much neutral. Economies do what they do. They follow their own logics, but presidents, there are things you can do to make it worse, or make it better. I mean, experiment with the Kennedy tax cuts, for example, the Reagan tax cuts.
Yeah.
Those things can trigger increased expenditure that foster growth, but by and large, it's
Does the lever get pulled in policy, or does it get pulled by Wall Street, or who pulls the levers?
Well, the lever gets pulled by policy. I mean, presidents and Congress approve or disapprove of tax cuts or tax increases, and of course, then the markets have to react to that. There, I mean, ultimately, when if you cut taxes or if you increase spending, for example, you have to issue debt, and Wall Street has to mediate that debt. If you want to spend more or spend less, So ultimately markets have to mediate that there, right? And that's you and I through our pension funds, through our financial advisors. Yeah, absolutely. So it's not a one-way street. I mean, Congress, president, they're not dictators, but certainly they have policy levers that can influence how market reacts to things because increases and decreases in debt associated with taxes have to be mediated through markets. Someone has to buy the Treasury securities, someone has to sell them, et cetera, right? And that's you and I through our institutions, financial institutions, yeah.
So it sounds like what we as citizens really need to do, if we really want to understand what's happening with the economy, it sounds like we really have to keep our eyes on Congress a lot of times, and maybe their relationship with the president.
Yeah.
It sounds like, because if Congress is having some issue with the president.
Yeah.
Then they're going to make some decisions that are going to.
The appropriations. What do you spend and the taxes relative to expenditure? That's a decision that the Senate and the House have to make. Say yay or nay. I mean, to the extent that we play party politics, I mean, you can presume that Republicans are inclined to agree with their Republican president, but not always, right? But and this is how a democracy works. I mean, we vote for our representatives that represent our policy preferences. Do you want to cut Social Security or increase it? And that's how it's supposed to work in theory, And so we get what we vote for. And we should vote if we have preferences for expenditure and taxation decisions. Yeah.
So let's talk about that for a second, because we often hear that the economy is going to be handled one way by a Democratic president or a Democratic-dominated Congress.
Yeah.
We hear it's going to be handled another way by a Republican president or a Republican-dominated Congress. How do political party philosophies impact the economy?
Well, they do differ because they have different policy preferences. I mean, not the stereotype, but Republicans typically are pro-growth, pro-business,
right.
low taxes, low spending, and Democrats pretty much want to. Are the opposite of that. They're typically. I mean, that's a broad caricature, but they have different policy preferences. The extent to which we redistribute from the rich to the poor, the nature of taxes, whether they should be progressive or regressive, and all based upon different theories of what's ideal for the growth rate of the economy. Right? There's competing visions, competing theories of what an ideal economy should look like. Yeah.
Because so the Democratic philosophy, the way it's going to impact the economy, it sounds like, is the Democrats will say, we want America, we want the citizens to buy into the economy. So that's where the taxes come in. Yeah. But the Republicans are saying, no, we're not going to do that to you. We want. So are the Republicans married to the trickle down theory that we want business to drive the economy? In
some broad sense. I mean, let me play it this way. I mean, Democrats are more concerned about redistributive policies. In other words, redistributing the pie to less lower income and less wealthy groups. In other words, a fair economy, a more egalitarian economy. Now, Republicans may not disagree with that. They said the best way to do that, of course, to the extent that they argue that redistributive policies disincentivize productivity. So the best way to do that is to work through tax cuts. So it's trickled down in that sense. It will spur productivity. The so-called supply side argument. If you want people to be more productive, you give them incentives to be productive. In other words, lower their tax rates, the poor and rich alike, right? That's so two different competing visions of how you spur productivity, right? Yeah.
So coming back to what was made of the price of eggs, the price of butter, the price of milk. When you look at all of these dynamics, how does that loop back around to people saying, I don't understand why my eggs are now $5 a carton. Just a year ago, they were $3 a carton. I mean, are we still talking supply chain woes? Are we talking about impacts of tax policies? Why does that loop back around?
Well, inflation is a tax. So, if you will, the individual, the household on Main Street is probably more attuned to the price of eggs and milk than anyone else, because that's I mean, as you go down the income distribution, the food budget share gets larger and larger, right? So, I mean, we go, you and I, I certainly probably go more to the grocery store than, say, a Donald Trump. So I'm more attuned to fluctuations in the price of that. And my household budget, it commands more of a share of my household budget than, say, a Donald Trump. So, you have these distributional effects, right? So middle America in contrast, and certainly less in middle America, their budgets are much more sensitive to increases in the prices of staples like eggs, chicken, beef, pork, et cetera, right? I mean, if you're a mom or dad, you'd like to take your kids out to McDonald's. I was always shocked about 2 years ago, I was coming through Darien, Connecticut, so I stopped over to get a meal. It was a bundle meal, double quarter pounder of cheese. It's $21.
Whoa!
This is 2 years ago. I'm saying, wow, and I'd say, wow. I mean, so imagine if I had a tow of kids with me. My kids are grown now, but you're more sensitive to stuff. I said, $21 in Darien, Connecticut, which is off 95 outside New York. So things like that, you say, wow. Wow.
How much is an economy impacted from state to state? Does it matter what state you're in?
Well, I mean, the price of gasoline, for example, will vary because different states have different state taxes, right? I mean, typically, when you come to Mississippi, Louisiana, South Carolina, Oklahoma, low. But when you go to, you can go to, once you start going to New Jersey, New York, I mean, the price of gasoline going from South Carolina to New York can virtually double. Even right now, can virtually double just because of the differences in taxes.
Yeah.
Right. So, and that's more of a function of state policy as well, too.
So
right.
now you got state policy.
You got state policy. Yeah. So so gasoline prices can vary over a short geographic hump from South Carolina to New York. That's not that far. Or New Jersey. I mean, and I drive that route a lot. So I know gas prices. Woo. I mean, they can almost double by the time you get to Connecticut. Yeah, you're talking 2.5 times higher than what they are in New Orleans or Atlanta. Yeah. So there's variation in state taxation policies as well as sales taxes, right? I mean, you go to New York City, sales tax is one of the highest in the nation. So the cost of a loaf of bread or a dozen eggs is going to be higher than it is in New Orleans or Oklahoma City because of variation in state sales tax rates. So and that's not federal, but those state policy can also affect the prices that we pay for staples like gasoline, eggs, milk, bread, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
So for the everyday person who is asking the question, why are my taxes so high? Why do I not have to pay a state tax in Texas or Florida, but then I come to Louisiana, I pay a state tax? For anyone who is trying to understand why the taxes are the way they are, how can they understand why taxes are the way they are?
Well, let me say, right now we have a cumulative deficit of some $32 trillion. When I left Morehouse College in 1982, our cumulative debt, what we borrowed and not paid for, was $2 trillion. So that's debt that has to be paid for at the federal level. Taxes, you pay that debt down by taxes. State debt is also large as well, too. So we have different political jurisdictions borrow to finance all sorts of things. You have Uncle Sam. You have Uncle Louisiana. You have Uncle New Orleans. Yeah. Each one issues debt to finance their local public projects, right? So when you don't have enough tax revenues, right, to finance those things, you have to borrow. That means you take out the credit card, right? So you're putting right now at the federal level, we have $32 trillion on our federal credit card. At the state level, it's not that much, but it is. But Louisiana has outstanding bonds. New Orleans has outstanding bonds, right? These things at some point have to be paid for. So the choices are either you increase taxes, which people are generally averse to, certainly the Republican Party is, or you cut spending, which boomers like me are also opposed to. I mean, am I willing to sacrifice a reduction in my pending Medicare and Social Security benefits? So it's a paradox in our democracies about how do we pay for things. But anyway, our taxes basically pay for these public expenditures, the public goodies that we enjoy so much, the roads, the Tomahawk missiles, the national parks, the Medicare, the Medicaid. These things, they have to be financed either through taxes and or debt. And we've shifted toward more debt financing over the past 40 years. And many argue that at some point, when will these chickens come home to roost? When will Americans be willing to pay much higher taxes or a reduction in the level of expenditures, right? Yeah.
This reminds, this does remind me, though, of a conversation I had at one of the universities where I was working. I was talking to a group of students, and they said, we need a football team. And the university didn't have a football team.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I hope you're ready for your tuition to go up if that happens. And they said, well, why would that happen? And I said, well, football teams are really expensive.
They're really expensive.
And so what has to happen is that the university has to pay for that somehow. And most likely, you're going to be the one to foot that bill because, number one, you're asking for it.
You're asking for it,
But then that money has to come from somewhere. The university doesn't have money just sitting around.
You can't get blood from a turnip,
Right, you can't start a football team. But I think for everyday people, a lot of us can't really grasp that because we see this big structure, we see this infrastructure around us, we see buildings, we see the roads. It's already here, and a lot of people may not realize that it had to get here. Somebody had to pay for this.
Yeah, think about the levees in New Orleans. I mean, we had to put $15 billion in just the levee system around Orleans Parish.
Yeah,
that's serious money.
Yeah,
that's serious. That is serious money, right?
But then also, and I hate to keep looping back around to this, but when you look at the price of goods and services, in those cases, you're dealing with a private company.
You're dealing with a private company, but there's another link between our expenditures and the price level. I mean, particularly when you think about borrowing, when Uncle Sam, Uncle Louisiana, Uncle New Orleans borrow, what do? Basically, they trade bonds for cash, and that money goes into the economy. Mm-hmm. There is an argument, there is a theory that basically when there's more money in the economy and productivity, that in itself puts upward pressure on the price level, right? And that's a favorite theory of Republicans, that inflation is a monetary phenomena fueled by deficit financing, right? So think about and they would argue, for example, during the COVID pandemic, and Trump was president, when you start cutting these checks, right, that increases the supply of money, more money relative to so you have two things going on. Trump cutting checks during COVID, supply chains being disrupted, that puts upward pressure on the price level as well too. That's another mechanism that can cause upward pressure. So that's where deficits can conceivably put upward pressure on the price level. When you finance too much with deficit spending. In other words, if you don't use taxes to finance it, you may be putting upward pressure on the price level. Right?
And one of the concerns, it seems right now, with the tariff policies that may come is that somebody's going to have to pay for those tariffs and
higher prices, right?
And that might be that's probably going to be the citizens most.
Yeah. If you keep out cheaper, say Chinese goods, for example, Temu, and if you take Temu off the table, you know what Temu is, right?
Oh yeah.
If you take Temu off the table and restrict me to Amazon, Amazon prices are higher, so that'll put upward pressure on the price level. So tariffs can cause the overall price level to increase because you're blocking out cheaper goods and services. Yeah. So that's all things being equal. That's the downside. That's the possible downside of tariffs. Yeah.
How can the everyday citizen educate themselves about the economy and at least try to keep track of what's going on?
Yeah. I mean, I would encourage everyday citizen to, when you read the newspapers, whether it's physically online, I mean, just peruse the business sections. I mean, whether it be the Wall Street Journal or the Times-Picayune. I mean, our business. We have a class of business journalists who are pretty respectable in writing about and weighing in upon economic policy and the economy in general. So those are, I mean, that's one thing I think that should be a civic imperative. I mean, to be attuned to economic policy and the state of the economy, because much of our lives, if a disproportionate amount of our bourgeois lives are tied to the state of the economy. I mean, that's just that's the way it is. So it's incumbent upon us, to be mindful of things and to pay attention, if you will, right? Given all the things that compete for our attention, I mean, I would suggest that should be one that the typical citizen should allocate attention to. Yeah.
And it sounds like also, just figuring out ways to keep asking those questions. I mean, it sounds like the one question that citizens should always ask themselves is, who's paying for this?
Who's paying for this?
Yeah.
And that's a question I don't think we weigh in on, because we can always kick the can down the field, down the road. For example, I mean, I can borrow now to finance my post-retirement, but it can be borne by yet unborn generations, right? 30-year bonds, for example. I mean, you float a 30-year bond, and 30 years down the road, the bill comes due. Either you refinance or you pay for it. So it's easy to do that. That's the miracle of modern financing. You can always push the liability down the road, as long as credit markets are willing to tolerate that there. And we're a superpower, so we can always float. Right now, we've had post-World War II, we're pretty much the only game in town, and everybody will snap up our debt. The Chinese, the Japanese, the Saudi Arabians. That's the luxury of that's one of the luxuries of being a superpower.
And so you just said that you'll have another country that'll snap up the debt. And this is where the national debt comes in. So this is
not all of it. Not all of it.
So is this where part of it comes in, where America is in a position where some of the money's been borrowed and now America has to pay somebody back?
Yes. I mean, the Chinese hold some of our debt, the Japanese hold some of our debt, and other countries. I mean,
is this something that everyday people know? Do everyday people realize that there are other countries that hold the U.S.'s debt?
Maybe not.
What are the students in your class that say, are they surprised to find out?
Sometimes they are. Yeah, sometimes they are. You know, of course, that could be to our advantage or disadvantage because, I mean, suppose we get in a trade war with China, for example. I mean, the Chinese could say, well, we're going to start selling your debt and cause interest rate. We're going to start selling your debt at a discount, causing interest rates to increase. And that'll wreak havoc upon homeowners or potential homeowners on Main Street because they'll retaliate by dumping whatever debt they have of ours on markets, having fire sale prices on our debts. And, okay, Mr. Trump, okay.
What can the average citizen do? What's the way forward for the average citizen to try to do something to help participate, to try to participate in shaping economic policy? What can the everyday citizen do? Midterms are coming up, so. Yeah,
well, the average is that our democracy works through political enfranchisement. I mean, inform yourself, be mindful of the basic economics of expenditure and taxes, and vote accordingly. Vote your sensible policy preferences. Yeah.
Dr. Gregory Price, he is a professor of economics at the University of New Orleans. Dr. Price, thank you so much.